Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to today's weekly walk with me, Carla. Of course, I am a tour guide with the Central Park Conservancy, and on today's weekly walk, we'll be taking a winter stroll in the North Woods. So thank you for joining us on today, Wednesday, February 8th, for a winter stroll in the North Woods. Before we get started, let's just review your Zoom features that are available to you on your toolbar. As always, you can use the chat feature to comment and say hello, as some of you already are. And if you should have any questions, please use the Q&A feature to ask us any questions you might have. And my colleague Jose will be on the back end answering questions to help you out. And you can also use the transcript feature if you would like. There will also be a poll launched during today's walk, so definitely be sure to respond to the poll, and I'll share the results of the poll as well. As always, our mission here at the Central Park Conservancy is to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. So as I mentioned, today we're going to just be taking a little short stroll through some of the North Woods. So we'll be entering at 103rd Street. We'll take a quick little look at the pool, a couple of rustic bridges, and a couple of classic arches, and then we'll wrap up our walk today. So let's get started right away. So we are going to enter at 103rd Street at the 103rd Street entrance. And if we look carefully, does that look like maybe a slight little dusting of snow perhaps along the top of the wall? It was a slight dusting of snow. And just as we make our way into the entrance, we notice these benches on our left on the path. And the first one has a plaque that says, "We depend for life itself on 6 inches of soil and the fact that it rains every now and then," by Dan Lufkin. And these really jumped out to me because I was thinking about the fact that we hadn't had any snow for quite a while. We had almost broken a record. And so our life depends on the 6 inches of soil and the fact that it rains or snows every once in a while. And I didn't previously know who Dan Lufkin was. But it turns out that he was a very successful Wall Street businessman, but he was also really passionate about the environment. And he was actually one of the first, a very early director of Connecticut's Environmental Protection Agency. And so he placed these quotes on the benches. And I really like these because sometimes for those of us who live in cities, we can sometimes forget how much life depends on very basic things like soil and water, including things like snow. I learn something new every day in Central Park, sometimes 2 or 3 things. But let's keep going on our walk here and make our way down the path. Now, it had just snowed very lightly the night before when I took these photos, and you can hardly tell, but I'm sure that the plants really appreciated the additional moisture. As we make our way down the path, we notice this very unique looking rocky outcropping, which to me almost looks like some giant creature who's wearing a disguise, or perhaps the large rocky back of a tortoise. And if we take a look at the pond, it's looking very quiet and serene. Hardly even any goose or duck activity out on the pond. And just ahead of us, we notice a rustic bridge we can make our way over to. And also just ahead of us on the path, we just see a Central Park Conservancy vehicle making its way ahead of us. They have been out in the park busy making sure everything is clean and safe and well maintained, as always. And here we get our first glimpse of the lock. The water really looks almost like a different color when we look at it here, but you can guess that it's a different temperature than it would be in the spring or summer as well. Now let's be adventurous and make our way down the path on this kind of rocky little staircase. Made out of the outcroppings here. Let's be very careful because it did snow very lightly. And we get a nice little view of this cascade here. This area looks so different than it normally does in different times of the year. In fact, this is a photo taken during the fall where you can really see the greenery. Now let's make our way under the majestic Glen Span Arch. This is one of my favorites. But did you know that the top of it was once constructed of wood? It looked very different. This is the largest image I could find of it. But I feel a little bit more secure it being made of stone, seeing as it carries the drive over us as we make our way underneath. And as we make our way under the arch, we notice on our right some green standing out in winter. And what could this greenery be? Well, where we're looking at right now, we see little moss and we also see a fern. And this is a winter hardy fern. This is the not very secularly titled Christmas fern, but its scientific name is the Polycycum acrosticoides. Probably not pronouncing that correctly. But this is a winter hardy fern that can actually make it through frosts. But usually it's the fronds of the fern actually stand erect until the first few frosts, and then the fronds of the fern will kind of fall down like this. And these ferns can be really helpful in preventing soil erosion and helping to develop healthy soil, because when they lay flat like this, you can see how it's holding on to all that fallen plant material and leaves that have fallen that help to slowly decompose over time and add to the soil. When the Conservancy restored the ravine in 1992, one of the issues that we needed to address was soil erosion in the ravine. And planting these native Christmas ferns can really help with that. You can see it's planted on a slope here. Its roots help to hold on to soil, and the fallen fronds help to hold on to things that will become healthy soil over time. As we continue to make our way along the loch, we also see that even though we're in the winter, this is a winter stroll, we can see that plants know that spring is just around the corner. It's coming. Don't forget that spring is on its way. These plants are ready for that. They have already set their buds, probably in summer or fall, but they're protecting them with these really colorful, interesting bud scales that will protect them through the winter. And then when spring does arrive, they will be all ready to burst into flower. And I find that on kind of gray winter days when there isn't a whole lot of color to enjoy in the park, taking a really close look at bud scales is a nice way to get some different color in your observations, whether you're in Central Park or another place outside. Let's keep making our way down the path, and we notice some more plants here. And these appear to be the dried seed heads of Clethra alnifolia, which is also known as sweet pepper bush. That's the common name for it. And when it's flowering, it actually has a really delicious smell, not at all like pepper, but it's called sweet pepper bush because its seed heads kind of look like peppercorns, which I can kind of see here. And as we keep making our way down the path, we also see this American holly who looks like he is all set for winter. Now, I did a pretty careful look at this holly and I could not find a single berry. So either some very meticulous birds ate every single berry off of this holly, or this is an example of a male holly. Holly trees are dioecious, meaning that there are separate plants for male and female. There are male plants and female plants, and the female plants are the ones that make the berries, but you do have to have a male holly somewhere nearby to give you those berries. If we take a closer look at the holly leaves, you can see how they really protect themselves against against a light dusting of snow, protecting themselves against frost and snow and ice. The leaves almost look like they're made out of leather or plastic, and the snow just sits on top there. But we'll keep making our way down the path. You can see a little bit more of the snow that had fallen in the park. And this path is kind of inviting to walk just a little bit closer to the loch. So let's make our way down here. And we see another rustic bridge that we can go check out ahead. So let's make our way over there. And I love taking views from the different bridges that are along various waterways. And so even though it's a bit of a brown winter day, I really like this view from the rustic bridge here on the lock. Now, just across nearby is a little place that whenever I'm going birding in the North Woods, I always stop by here, and it looks really different in the wintertime. But I'd like to go down there. Again, let's be very careful when we're using the steps and it's wintertime. They could be a bit slippery. And while our heads are down checking out those steps, we notice some more greenery on one of the rocky outcroppings just to the right of us. Now, we see some moss here. And I'll be honest, I am not an expert in moss. I really admire moss, but I have a lot to learn about it. So I couldn't tell you exactly what species this is. My guess is that this could be creeping fingerwort, which is a nice creepy name for a moss. But it's possible it's a different species of moss. If you know what kind of species it is, please feel free to add it in the chat. But I really like this, all the colors that are there with the vibrant green of the moss, and we've got some orangey brown of the fallen leaves and even a little red leaf. It almost looks like a little centerpiece that was made by a woodland gnome who lives in the North Woods. Then we notice some additional moss. Again, another place where you can enjoy some greenery, even in the smallest places in wintertime. And I hope you guys can kind of see the starry shape of the little individual moss pieces. And the common name for this is star moss, based on that shape. And while we're looking down, it's hard not to notice this interesting colors and shapes in the rocky outcropping here. It almost looks like some areas are pink or orange or peach. There's lots of different colors and kind of blockish shapes here. Now, I am not a geologist either, but this does appear to be an igneous rock, and it's possible that some of this is feldspar. But we've been looking at the ground so long and watching the steps and staring at the moss, we didn't even notice that the sun came out and the skies are already blue. It's important to look in all different directions when you're taking a walk in Central Park. Let's keep going on our way here, and we'll make our way down this other snowy path that is really inviting, I think. And at this point, I also want to go ahead and launch our poll and find out, where is your favorite place to take a stroll in Central Park, even if it's virtual? Where's a place when it's wintertime? Where do you like to stroll in Central Park? There's lots of great places. And even if you're far away, maybe you have a favorite place that you like to stroll with us virtually or remotely or in your imagination. So let's take this path. And I don't know if you can almost hear the sound of snow crunching under your feet as we make our way down this path, but that is one of my favorite sounds, is the sound of snow crunching as you make your way on a snowy path. And we've got this nice curved line, again, inviting us to keep going forward. And at the end of the path, not only do we have this beautiful pine tree welcoming us at the end of the path, but it's actually complete with a little tufted titmouse just inside the pine tree. Well, Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux really knew what they were doing with these curved paths, which is an essential part of their design for Central Park, because they really do invite you to just keep exploring, because you want to know what is there just around the bend. So let's keep going. And we can see just a little bit of the baseball fields. And we also see, I know they're tiny there, but there are a lot of robins all over the grass here. So I'm wondering if perhaps the light dusting of snow didn't activate some of the worms underground, and perhaps that's why all these robins are out here. Let's make our way now down to another arch. This is one of my favorite spots in Central Park. We have Springbanks Arch, and of course it is named for the spring that is right to the side. So we can see this natural spring flowing. with just a little bit of help from urban infrastructure. Now, Springbank's Arch is one of the lower arches in Central Park. I didn't bring a tape measure with me, but I've been told it's just a little bit over 6 feet or so, which isn't really a problem for me. I'm only 5'3", so I didn't run into the arch in any way. But if any of you are a bit taller, this would be the time you want to duck down before we make our way underneath the arch. Here is what it looked like quite a while ago. This is 1865, what Springbank's Arch looked like in 1865. You can see that today in 2022, we no longer have a bearded gentleman with a top hat and a cane. That's something we'll have to work on restoring into the Springbank's Arch environment. But we'll keep going down the path just a little further. And you can see with all these curves, there's a lot more that we could explore along in the woods here. And let's see where folks liked to take a stroll in Central Park. It looks like you're pretty evenly divided. About a quarter of you love to take a stroll in the North Woods, which is great. This is perfect for you. About another, just a little less than a quarter of you love to take a stroll in the mall, which is definitely an area I think is pretty magical in all 4 seasons, as is the North Woods. Around the pond over Gapstow Bridge, I know that's a place I love to go during winter time, and I'm curious if there is somewhere else that you love to stroll in Central Park, if perhaps you've put it in the chat to share where you love to stroll in Central Park when it is winter time. But you can see, even if it's cold, even if a little bit of snow has fallen, it's a great time to come out into Central Park. We've barely encountered another soul here in the North Woods, so it's kind of a nice, quiet time to experience this space. And before we wrap up today, let's take one last glimpse of the blue skies that came out over our heads as we were strolling today. And we just happened to notice a hawk flying over us, who is also continuing to explore the rest of the North Woods, probably looking for something to eat. But that concludes our walk today. I want to thank you so much for joining me in the North Woods to see a little bit of that snow dusting that we got to experience in the park and where that fell. Coming up, we have tomorrow, you can join us for our virtual tour, Harlem's Backyard. That will be tomorrow, February 9th at 2 p.m. And you can find a link to that in the chat, which Jose will share. So be sure to join us for that. If you think about it, much of the North Woods is, in fact, as is Central Park, part of Harlem's Backyard. So to learn more about the history of the community and Central Park, be sure to join us for that virtual tour. And with that, I want to thank everyone so much for joining us again this week. We look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday. I will keep this open for a little bit longer to be sure we've answered all of your questions. But on behalf of Central Park Conservancy, I want to thank you for joining us. Stay safe and be well, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much, everybody.